Hello, this is a special one, at least in my eyes, because it's pretty rare that I come across a game that checks basically every single box that I can possibly think of. And I don't have the same checklist as everybody. I totally understand that. We all have our own preferences, but especially when I talk about media and I attempt to criticize and analyze contemporary media, I really prioritize creativity and originality, basically above everything else. It can be a very competent piece of media along all the conventional lines, but that's not especially interesting to me, and that's not the kind of stuff that I tend to seek out. That doesn't get me really excited. That doesn't make me feel inspired to create my own stuff. But then, when I do find something genuinely original, genuinely creative, and just bursting with ideas and delivers an experience that I've just never had before, I'm very into it, and I'm very compelled to talk about it here on the channel. Cloud Gardens, I don't have criticisms. I can't really think of anything negative to say about the experience. And honestly, even if you're one of my viewers who doesn't really get into video games all that much, I still highly recommend this one. This is something that I've had before here on the channel. I had it in a stream of mine back when I did a stream of the some of the games that were included in the itch bundle for Ukraine, which had hundreds and hundreds of titles, and you would put in whatever donation amount you wanted. This is one of the games included in that bundle. It wasn't released anywhere else at the time, just on itch as far as I'm aware, and I streamed some of it. I streamed some of the opening levels. I was very impressed with the general idea of the game, which I guess I should explain. It's kind of a gardening sim, and it's also just kind of a sandbox game, and it's also just one of the most enthralling and relaxing game experiences I've ever had. And I guess technically you could call it a puzzle game, but basically you're shown a little diorama, a little low poly diorama of some presumably post-apocalyptic setting or scenario. There's just refuse, there's just signs, broken down stuff, everything's in pieces. You're only ever getting one little square-shaped chunk of this world at a time, and your mission, I guess, is to have it be mostly, if not entirely, covered with some kind of plants, with some kind of foliage. You do that using little seeds. You unlock more seeds as you play through the game. You have vines, you have flowering vines, you have several different types of trees, cacti, all kinds of stuff that you unlock over the course of the game. And they all behave in relatively distinct ways. Aside from the seeds, you also just have objects that you can place within the environment. Some of these are structural elements that'll kind of snap onto each other to build a new little bit of the diorama, or it's just loose objects that'll just fall wherever you place them. Each object has a radius. Within that radius, it promotes growth for the plants that fall within. And that's it. That is the whole experience. And something happened as I started to play through the Steam version of the game and really progress further into the campaign, I guess we could call it. It just really started to click. I started to have a more in-depth understanding of the game's mechanics and how certain seeds and plants perform, the sort of game meta overall, like the best strategy for tackling certain types of certain environments or certain objects that you'll find in an environment. And honestly, that day when I got into the Steam version, I think I spent 5 or 6 consecutive hours in the game, which is not something I do anymore. Like, I'm an adult. I have things to do. I very rarely sink that much time into a game, especially in 1 or 2 sittings. Like, it just doesn't happen anymore. But it happened here, and I completely understand why. Every single little bit of the game, every little piece of progress in a level or the next unlock, messing around with creative mode, which is way too deep. Like, there's so much that I've unlocked for it. Every little element, every new level, each new zone, I was just delighted. I was almost like just surprised. I expected it to be a very short game, and some people would probably still consider it relatively short, but it just works. Every little bit of it works, and I was just constantly surprised in the best way that I got to keep playing it and that it kept delivering new things for me to do. And even at this point where I've seen all of the campaign levels, I don't care. I'm back in it. I was dreaming about it last night. It's a space that I love inhabiting. I love being inside of this game. We also have this fantastic ambient music that appears to be, to some degree, adaptive as well. So certain plants will have their own little, usually instruments or little melodies attached to them. So when you place them, it'll play a little ditty, but also that seems to be integrated into the overall track as that environment grows out over time. There's a little jingle that sort of signals when you've accomplished a certain objective. There's a little jingle for when you're ready to move on to the next part of the level or the next level proper, which is actually shockingly helpful because you do get engrossed. You get to this point where you're not even paying attention to the gamey part so much anymore. You're just thinking, ooh, if I put this here, oh, that'll really grow out. Now, wait, now I want to switch to this kind of seed, and that'll give a completely different, that'll add to the color palette in a certain way, or just the sort of a visual texture of this thing that I'm creating. And that's another part of it too, is that every level you finish successfully is essentially something that you have created. Yes, the game to a certain degree does limit what you can do or how you can design something within levels. That just makes sense, also based on the seeds that you have unlocked at the time. That's going to be your arsenal to work with in that level. And it does kind of suggest certain areas to plant, certain seeds. It communicates non-verbally that way, where you start to understand, okay, it probably wants me to put this here, or this level is encouraging me to use more bamboo, or it's encouraging me to use more mushrooms or something like that. And no matter how many times you play the level, it'll probably just about always look completely different. Unless you do exactly the same thing in exactly the same way in the same order, it's going to become something different. And especially when you've unlocked basically all of the seeds and a lot of the objects, you can go crazy. You can really make it your own. You can kind of make things easier for yourself since some of the seeds have a lower budget, I guess we could say. The cost of certain seeds is lower, but at the same time you feel the pull to just create something that's very visually appealing. It's this wonderful balance of gaminess and just supreme, profound relaxation. Even just this game premise, like maybe there's something out there somewhat similar to this. Please let me know if there is. But beyond that, I can't think of anything else that feels quite like this, that looks quite like it, even though the low poly look has been somewhat hip in the past few years. And it also achieves this incredible sense of capturing what I guess is known as post-anthropomorphism, right? So it's not just a post-apocalyptic setting, it is specifically a post-apocalyptic setting where humans are just not a thing. You kind of have an implied character, I guess, just by the fact that you have agency, you're making things happen in the world. We never see a human figure. We only have the remains of the human world, and that is it. It's so incredibly peaceful. We don't even get animals outside of crows. There are crows. That's all I can think of, really. And post-anthropomorphism just happens to be something that I'm already really interested in. I like the idea of settings and stories based around these places where humans just don't factor in. We're not telling human stories anymore because why? And it's lovely. It's such a fantastic means of escapism. And on top of that, it's so elegantly designed. The mechanics themselves, UI, various keyboard shortcuts that you just kind of adapt to over time. Even the camera controls, I feel, are very intuitive. There's this inherent sense of expressivity to the whole thing. And because of the art direction being so strong, everything you make is going to look great. Even if you go out of your way to try to make something a little goofy and weird, you'll probably find someone going, no, that works. Like, I understand what you were going for. Like, it just always looks good. All of the assets, just the gradient backgrounds. There's also a pretty powerful camera/photo mode that you can use by pressing the space bar. Lighting options, color options, camera options. They just thought of so many things. The gameplay itself is so focused that apparently they were able to spend plenty of time on just having a deep understanding of what the player would want to do and how to make it easier for the player to do those things. On top of that is even just the communication with the player. There are text tips at the front of the game as a form of tutorial, of course, but past that, no, you just pick up on things. The game's not telling you anything. There's no voiceover. You just understand intuitively, and that's very hard to pull off. That is very hard to pull off, and I think that like player communication is something that a lot of game studios just don't execute very well at all, and I think it can easily make a game experience frustrating. It's not here. Frustration in general isn't really here. There is technically a fail state for some of this stuff, for the story missions. You can mess up. You can, run out of resources, essentially, of both seeds and objects, and you haven't covered enough of the environment, so you can't progress. In that case, you either restart, or you can just save at any point in any playthrough of any level and just load that up whenever you want. So you can create as many save points as you want. You don't have to use any save points at all if you don't want to, if you want it to be a little bit more challenging. But again, it all depends on this evolving understanding of how the game works and what you want to do with it. The overall sense of satisfaction, it's unique, and at the same time, I can think of a couple of other very creative games that have not a similar sense of satisfaction, but a similar level of satisfaction, something like the Katamari games, or even Unpacking, which I was very impressed with when that released late last year. Basically, every moment of gameplay contributes to some sort of forward progress. And that's probably at the core of why I just have become completely enthralled with Cloud Garden so far. Is it's working on so many different levels, and it doesn't have any of the usual pitfalls. Now, is the game for everyone? Probably not. Some people might be looking at this and say, oh, that looks kind of boring. If that's your read on it, maybe not for you. I don't think I can convince you otherwise. But my gosh, if you get it, if this is clicking for you already, just do it. Just do it. Buy it on whatever platform you can. One of the best experiences I've had with the game, easily this year, and also probably over the last several years. But that's Cloud Gardens. Very happy to talk about it, and I can't wait to get back into it and play some more. That's where I'm at with this one. But that's all for now. Thanks for stopping by.